everybody, and welcome into Blue Jays Today, where we always have something to say about the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm your host, Nicholas Blaylock.
And I'm your host, Adam Peddle. And today, guys, we're going to be breaking down the Toronto Blue Jays rotation as it is today. There could be some more moves coming, but we got to look at what this rotation looks like right now, and is there cause for concern? Because we saw a little bit of hiccups last year, some aging last year, and we saw some big breakouts from BOwden Francis. And is this rotation good enough to compete in the AL East? Before we get into it, guys, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Blue Jays Today. Now, we always knew that this rotation was the strength of this Toronto Blue Jays team, and walking into this offseason, we felt pretty confident if we didn't add to this rotation that it would still be pretty good. But let's take a deeper look into these guys' stats and their sabermetrics, because there might be some concerns that might come up during the seasons, and we got to be aware of it right now.
Well, let's start with the ace, Kevin Gausman, right? Like, basically, during the time frame that he has been with the Toronto Blue Jays, the guy has been phenomenal. But just last year, you started to see a little bit of the other shoe drop. Now, we need to paint the picture properly here, because when you just look at the numbers on a page now and you don't think about everything that transpired last year, it's easy to go, oh, well, he's getting older and maybe he's taking a slight decline and blah, blah, blah. But let's remind ourselves that at the beginning of last season,
right,
he was injured.
He was.
Right?
He
didn't get that, all the spring training starts that he needed. He was kind of thrust into things probably earlier than he should have been. I remember speaking to Joe Siddle about that, hearing that from some other analysts. So across the board, Kevin Gausman was starting behind the eight ball. And I mean, that was very reflective from his first half numbers, right? What was the ERA in that first half? 4.5.
4.5, right?
You know?
And then you look at the second half, and it's 2.92, and you might think to yourself, wow, okay, well, all you need to do is get warmed up. And yes and no, that is absolutely could be the case, but also isn't the case really, because we saw a very different Kevin Gausman than what we've been used to in the last few years, right? Kevin Gausman, when you think about him before last season, you thought big strikeout guy, right? Guy who can, really get people to swing and miss on that splitter. But what we've been seeing in the last actually few seasons is that splitter, the vertical break on it is starting to decline. Now, if you're not too familiar with the vertical break, it literally is the break by inches going downwards like this, which we all know the splitter ball does, right? But now you're starting to see it's not breaking as much. This little cyan blue line right here, you can see it's starting to drop after 2021. So what Kevin Gausman had to do, because that wasn't splitting as much, it was hanging up in the zone, it was getting hit, or if it was starting low, it wasn't breaking too much or fooling a lot of batters. What Kevin Gausman had to do going into the second half of last year is he started to use that fastball a lot more and started to pitch to contact versus pitch to strikeout. In the past years, when Kevin Gausman was on his game, you would see him locate that four-seam fastball at the bottom of the zone and get batters to look at it, right? Because that splitter, they would think it was coming on two strikes and it would drop out of the zone, but really it would stay right there and get the strikeout. But he wasn't getting that nowadays, or in the second half of last year, so he had to start pitching to contact, and the strikeout numbers dropped because of it. So Kevin Gausman, yes, he bounced back and the ERA was great, but it was a different Kevin Gausman. I think going into this year, you got to kind of see, what does he have this year? Is that splitter splitting enough? If not, is he going to have to develop more of a contact kind of pitcher?
It's really interesting looking at some of the numbers on each one of his pitches right now. Speaking of that splitter, I mean, again, like, this is just a pure numbers on a page thing, and this is why it's easy to get misled. The batting average against was actually phenomenal. He had a 169 batting average against the split finger. However, we also need to remember what we were watching last year, and I think a big reason why is because there's not a lot of people swinging at it in the first place.
Right.
Because a lot of times that splitter was like so far outside the zone that it's like, okay, well, I actually don't need to go after this one at all. Whereas like in years prior, they might have been fooled and they might have taken a hack at it. So yes, I mean, like, again, the numbers look decent, and ultimately, I'm not so worried about Kevin Gausman, but you might see a different version of him this year. Where are you at, just at, I guess, like, level of concern with Gausman? Do we still think that he's the ace here?
I mean, a level of concern, I guess we could play this, with every single pitchers here. So if we rank it out of 10, 10 being a lot of concern, 1 being no concern, I'm at a 3. I'm not really concerned. I mean, that was probably the first hiccup you saw with Kevin Gausman as a Toronto Blue Jay, because A, you could really point to the health too, but also B, difference in the split finger, vertical break. And I think he's adjusted well. And we saw what he did through, adversity this year. And he managed to come out the other side very well and still put up a pretty good year. So I'm at a 3 really right now. I think he's going to be just fine this year.
Yeah, I'm really not concerned at all. Like maybe even a 2 for me, just because ultimately, I mean, all those arguments about, well, the break wasn't breaking enough and blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe that was because of the injury, right?
Right.
Could have been. So,
could have been.
I mean, I know that, it's scary when you pull up the Baseball Savant or the Baseball Reference and next to the age category, it says 34 and you're like, oh man, we're getting up there. And then when you look at some of these, and they're all very blue, bottom percentiles, I get it. But I trust Kevin Gausman, and what we saw in the second half, I think, is going to be a lot more indicative or at least of the type of pitcher that we're going to see. Granted, because he is up there in age, there is obviously more risk for injury concern. So I would hope that the Toronto Blue Jays can monitor, manage, condition, do all of that stuff really good, because the health, I think, is honestly the most. If I had to be concerned about anything with Gausman, it would probably be that.
Absolutely, right? And now I know Baseball Reference has a projection right here, 3.67 ERA with a whip of 1.231 with 11 wins. I know wins don't mean that much. Get 169 innings. I mean, the innings are kind of low for me, but if you can give me a 3.67, I mean, that's solid for the back half of your career, almost the end of your career. No offense, Gausman, but that's a very solid number. I would take that.
100%, man. Let's move on and talk about La Máquina, somebody who you do not need to worry about in regards to health at all. My level of concern with that guy in terms of health, like 0, -1. Like we
knock on wood.
Yeah, seriously, right? This guy's gonna, his arm's gonna fall off this following year because I said that. But I mean, 31 and 32. 31 starts?
He is 32 starts.
32
every single.
starts.
I've been asking about his age. Still 30.
No. 32 starts, year in, year out. That is what he's going to give you, man. And I mean, Jose Berrios is such a interesting one because, I mean, you look at MLB, and it's such a volatile sport, right? Like, even the best players, like, their stats will go up and down and up and down. Feels like every single year, you kind of know what you're going to get out of Jose Berrios, other than that, like,
2022 year. That was a weird one.
Like a fucking wild one.
Yeah.
It feels like I know Jose Berrios and what I can expect.
Yeah, exactly, right? Now, again, cause for concern. The one thing we'll bring up right here is people have been talking about this online is like, well, he had a good year last year, but if you remember throughout the season, all those like kind of expected numbers were like, well, he might be getting a little bit lucky. The expecting batting average in the 15th percentile, expected ERA in the 70th percentile. He was supposed to have a 4.74 last year ERA, but ended up with a 3.60. And why is that? Well, I think if you're just looking at all the peripherals, they're kind of just not really going in La Máquina's favor. I mean, that four-seamer got beat up, and four-seamers usually do get beat up, but it did get beat up bad. A 3.05 batting average, and if you look at that kind of run value right there is a -5. But La Máquina, you know what he does every year. Every year I can tell you this. He's going to walk in with some pitches that work really well and some that don't. And then throughout the season, the batters, the league is going to adjust to him, start tacking those pitches, and then he's going to have to make a readjustment at some point throughout the season. And then those pitches are going to start working really well. Last year, it was the sinker ball, which is also can be confused with some of you guys. That's that two-seamer that runs in on the hands on the lefties. Look, if I'm La Máquina, that was what was working for me last year, that two-seam sinker. I'm going to start out with that, see how that works. But knowing him and knowing what kind of a Iron Man he is, he's going to be in there every fifth day, and he's going to see if he can keep that going. And if they start adjusting, then he's going to have to adjust to the league.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'm just not really concerned about Jose Berrios. Maybe that's because there are other guys in the rotation that, are more cause of concern for me. But I think, like, ultimately this is somebody that when you traded for and when you extended, you intended to be kind of a set it and forget it. And that's still what he is for me. You set it and you forget it. There are going to be days where it's not working, and there are going to be times where La Máquina does get beat up. But when it all comes around, when September rolls in, you're going to see La Máquina with, high 20 starts and an ERA probably somewhere in the mid-3s. So, honestly, I'm not concerned about Jose Berrios at all. I mean, similar to Kevin Gausman, give me like a a 2 on the concern scale, you know, where I'm at.
I mean, he's still young, and we've seen how consistent he's been. The only concerning part for me is all those expected numbers. It just kind of jumps out of the page.
I get it.
They're very similar to when he had a 5 ERA, but it didn't happen. So at the end of the day, I'll give me a 3. Maybe I'm a little more skeptical, you know, of like the whole expected stuff. But I do have faith in Jose Berrios that he is going to bounce back and be good.
That's the thing. Like, I just believe in him, and, you know, ultimately, like, I appreciate and can acknowledge the expected numbers and the sabermetrics and everything like that, but ultimately the guy's got 9 years in the league, and 8 of them have been
very
pretty
solid.
much all the same.
Yeah,
so
very solid.
I'm gonna stick with the history and go with that. But you guys let us know in the comments, where are you at with Jose Berrios? Let's move on and talk about somebody that I think both of us are a little bit more concerned about here, being Chris Bassitt. Now, he is 35 years old right now, and you really started to see that last year. Chris Bassitt doesn't have the blow-away fastball to fall back on. He never has. And in, you know, his whole career, he's never really needed it. You know, he's come out and he's spoken extensively on how he actually doesn't like these, you know, how these young pitchers are coming out here and blowing their arms open, and how he thinks that the art of pitching should be one of more finesse, which when he was in his heyday, it was finesse. Last year, though, we kind of saw the other side.
Yeah,
of things.
I mean, he lives and dies on the edges. And what I mean by lives and dies, you really did see it last year. I mean, again, last year wasn't atrocious by any means. He had a 4.16 ERA, but the whip, here's what I really want to point out here. If you could see this on the screen, 1.46 whip compared to a career average of 1.23. So it was severely high. You could see the walk percentage drop. If you look at 2023, walk percentage in the 70th percentile. Back in 2024, it was down into the 32nd percentile. He gave up a lot of walks because he wasn't just clipping the edges. Now, I could literally picture Bassitt's face right now getting frustrated at some calls, but the point is you weren't getting the calls and you're putting runners on base. So that's what led to an inflated ERA, a higher whip, you know, him going only 171 innings compared to the 200 innings that he had in 2023, because he's pitching a lot more in these games. So for me, that's the major concern. That was the major dip. And whatever it might be for him, you know, you got to figure it out, because you look at the fastball velocity, it actually went up a tick last year, if you can believe it or not. You know, you look at everything that happened last year in terms of velo, it didn't really go down. For him, it's got to just be coming down to the command, and really that's it. So you might be able to point to age just a little bit, but for me, it's like I can really point at the walk percentage, and if you're still walking people, then you're going to perform exactly what you did last year.
I'm looking at his pitch arsenal right now. Extensive pitch arsenal, by the way, everybody. But the sinker, which is the one pitch that is consistently throughout his whole career, he's been around that 40% mark. He throws it around 40%, which is exactly where he was last year. That sinker was getting hit for a batting average of 327 last year, which is significantly higher than any other year in his career, actually. I mean, the season prior, it was down at 220. So, I mean, just goes to show that right there was getting absolutely annihilated. And honestly, I think what was going on there is the fact that if you're a batter, well, you didn't really need to worry so much about some of these other pitches, and you were getting ahead in the count. And, you know, so then it's like, okay, well, now we can just sit and we can wait on this thing and we can annihilate. Whereas, like, when you're behind in the count with Chris Bassitt, he's got so many things that you can throw, and, you know, you're swinging at stuff. You're trying to play defensive out there.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you're 2-0 on the count, well, now it's like, okay, we can really hone in and we can just destroy that sinker, which ultimately isn't going to come that hard at you anyways.
Yeah.
So it's going to be easier for you. So all of these things, I just, you know, they're all kind of leading to where we got last year. And ultimately, it comes back to the fact that if you are going to pitch the way that Chris Bassitt does, you got to hit your spot. You just got to hit your spot. You got to be pinpoint accurate.
I mean, you look at the kind of heat map right here of all of his pitches now. They're all kind of spread out because of the percentage he throws it at. I mean, 4, 4, 4, 5, 7. Those are his bottom 5 pitches he throws in terms of usage. Like, they're going to be all spread around, but you can see he's wild. Like, why would I attack any of these pitches where I don't know where the hell they're going to be going? Or I can sit on this sinker who's dead center in the middle of the plate 40% of the time.
And
so
let's think about it from Bassitt's perspective, too. Okay, it's like, oh, well, you know, there's a guy on base already. Now I'm down in the count. Now I'm down in the count 2-0. I have to put one in the zone.
Yeah.
Well, this is the pitch that I have to put in the zone.
And especially in the rare situations where there's a speedster on first base, then my only good pitch that can stop him from stealing is my sinker. I gotta throw a velo right here, and it's gonna go in the middle of the zone, right? So for Bassitt, that's the big key for him. Now, where's your level of concern with Bassitt going into 2025?
It is actually significantly higher than the other boys. I think I was at like a 2 for both Gausman and Jose Berrios. I'm relatively concerned for Chris Bassitt. I could see a reality right now where the numbers continue to tick down, actually, and it's not that great of a year, or alternatively a season where he ends up kind of being at the very bottom of the depth chart on the Toronto Blue Jays rotation. I think I'm walking in at a solid 7 right now. Maybe that's a little disrespectful. It's somewhere in the 6 to 7 range.
Yeah.
I could certainly see him, because he's had such a good career, like bouncing back and getting all back to where he was, but there is reason to be worried here.
Yeah, for me, I'd probably be at a 6 right now, because it is, it's a simple fix. You just fix your command and then you're back in the game. But you can say that with anybody. But that's why I'm on the upper part, whereas like Berrios and Gausman, it was like, well, your pitches are changing, and they always change year to year, but they've made adjustments, and I've seen it. I didn't see Bassitt really make an adjustment clearly last year by dropping one of his, or 2 or 3 of his many pitches and selecting and focusing on some, but I didn't really see that adjustment. And I kind of just saw more walks on the board. So for me, it's a 6.
Yeah, all right, I get that, man. Let's move on and talk about one of the young and exciting breakouts on the Toronto Blue Jays last year. Somebody I think we were both very, very excited about. If you had like a scale of excitement right here, like I'm 8 or 9 when we're talking about Mr. BOwden Francis. The second half of the year for BOwden Francis was fucking phenomenal. Like, seriously, like genuinely insane. The guy finished with an ERA of 3.3 on the year, and after they because he kind of brought him up, then sent him back down, and brought him back up again,
right?
And after that, after he was brought up for either the second or third time, I forget how many roster or how many transactions they made with him, but once he had that and he was brought up for good, completely different guy. And somebody that honestly, like, when you rolled him out, I thought we were winning that game.
In the second half, right? It felt unstoppable. And how many times can he go for that no-hitter or that perfect game, right? And the difference for BOwden Francis, and I know everybody knows the famous quote, is he let that shit eat, right? He let that fastball play in the middle of the zone, and you could really see it reflects on his baseball savant here. 92nd percentile in fastball run value. That's the value of that pitch right there, because he just pumped in the center zone. You can look at it right there. He did not care. He was pumping that thing in the middle of the zone. He had a batting average of 174, right? And that worked perfectly with the split finger. If you're pumping in the fastball and you're throwing the split finger, then you're getting a lot of swings and misses and a lot of low batting averages and weak contact. And that's a big adjustment you saw too. We talked about it in spring training as well, where he was going to be throwing that split finger a lot more this year and working off the fastball. And my goodness, did it do wonders. Now, if we're going to talk about any sort of concern with him, there's a couple things you could bring up. One, you could bring up, well, it was a smaller sample size.
Yeah.
He only had really in the second half, he had 65 innings, which is still a decent amount, and he had 11 games. But it was, not enough to be like, well, this is for sure who you are. You're a 180, Jacob deGrom type of pitcher. So that's the one concern you could just point out, sample size. The second concern that I could bring up right here, and any pitcher is going to understand this, is, well, if my game plan is to throw the fastball in the zone and throw it at a high clip, which he did last year, well, batters and other teams know that you're going to do this. So if they make an adjustment and go and sit on your fastball, how are you going to react when they start hitting your fastball? Because eventually it'll come around to that, unless your fastball is one of the greatest in the world, which, no disrespect to BOwden Francis, it probably isn't.
It's not.
It's not, right, in terms of velo and stuff like that. But if you can put it in the middle zone and they're starting to hit it, what are you going to do to adjust to that? And that's where, I don't know. I haven't seen that yet.
And honestly, this is now the next step for BOwden Francis. Ultimately, everything that we saw from him on the mound last year was insane, and it is cause to be excited. The concern is the fact that, again, like we gotta go all the way back to, where did this guy come from? This was a 7th round draft pick back in 2017. He's 28 now. This is not like a highly touted, young, exciting guy or anything like that. It's kind of just, came onto the scene and was, really found it last year. And now it's like, okay, well, is this like you being like a super late bloomer, and like now it's like you all of a sudden, or was this, the league didn't really know what was coming. They weren't familiar with your stuff. It was taking them a while to adjust to it type thing. And now that they've seen you, they're going to come in and, they're going to have a different game plan, right? And that's honestly where I'm at right now. I believe in what we saw last year from BOwden Francis, but to, immediately lock him in as being like the next ace on the Toronto Blue Jays, I don't think that's fair to the kid.
Yeah.
And I think you'd be doing yourself an injustice if you started to believe that. So I am extremely excited. I am also concerned for BOwden Francis because of all of that. Where are you at right now with your I guess, level of concern with BOwden Francis?
It's interesting because, again, our rotation, it definitely gets elevated to a new level if BOwden Francis can be as good as he was last year. Absolutely. But it's like, if he's not, well, that's why he's slotted in that 4 spot. And we're expecting maybe a little bit less of a performance, maybe like a high 3 or a low 4. And you'd be like, okay, well, we'll take that. And if you give us 170, 180 innings, which is what he wants to do this year. So I guess maybe just because of the unknown, maybe I'm between a 3 and a 4. I'll go 3 because I was very excited with the adjustments. And that's where I kind of live and base my judgments based off of, is how can you adjust to adversity? He adjusted better than anybody on the Blue Jays last year, and to an exceptional level, to like historic levels, with those runs where he had no hitters going. So I'd probably say a 3. And that 3 comes from, can you do it again? Right? Just based off that.
I mean, it's weird. I guess, like, concern, not concern. Like, I'll tell you this. I think that BOwden Francis is going to fall back to earth a bit, but I hope that he levels out and ends up being kind of that, like, high 3 ERA type of guy, middle to back end of the rotation. I'd be very, very happy with that, if that's where it is. So I guess I'm not overly concerned that he's going to fall off a cliff. I don't think that's going to happen, but maybe that's just because my expectation for him is where it is. So I'll also go with a I guess level of concern of 4 right now for BOwden Francis. I'm still very, very excited with what he has. I hope that he comes out here and just it's like no hitter here, no hitter there, just continues to go insane mode.
Amazing, right?
I mean, I do believe, though, that, we're going to drop down a little bit. I know that you have the Baseball Reference projections right there. Where do they have him?
Well, it's interesting. I don't think they're factoring in that he's going to be a starter because they only have him for 92 innings. I think they just saw the sample size last year of how many is it, 103 last year, and they're kind of just basing it off this. But I think he's going to get a lot more innings this year if he could stay healthy. They got him at a 3.42 ERA with a WHIP of 1.054. I would be so ecstatic if I saw that kind of numbers over a full 32
tack on
starts.
Another 50 innings or something, and now we're really talking.
Exactly.
But ultimately, very excited for BOwden Francis and hoping that he can build on his second half last year. Let's finish things off here with Yariel Rodriguez. Now, if you guys can believe it or not, this guy did not pitch a single inning in relief for the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, I mean, both Adam and I were under the impression that there was at least some time that he came in from the bullpen, but apparently that just wasn't the case. And Yariel Rodriguez was spot starting pretty much all season long. We were spot starting, and as you guys remember, like there was injuries to Manoah off the top, and then obviously he had some injuries throughout the whole season. So
he was
Yariel Rodriguez was that guy. And to varying levels of success. There were some starts where he came out and Yariel Rodriguez was like BOwden Francis. And then there was other ones where he came out and it was just like we couldn't make it through the fucking first inning.
Yeah, literally 6 runs. I remember that one Baltimore game. It's like 6 runs and 2 outs. It was like, oh my God.
Yeah, we're done.
We're over.
GG, you know. So Yariel Rodriguez showed promise. He also showed areas that need to be worked on, right? And that you're gonna get that from somebody who's never played in MLB before, unless of course you're Yamamoto or probably gonna be Roku.
right.
But whatever.
Right.
Where are you at right now with Yariel Rodriguez?
Yeah, it's interesting because like it's hard to kind of assess the player type that he is. I mean, if you look at his splits right here, he's got the 4-seam, the slider, sinker, curveball, split finger. Like those are a very generic 5-pitch kind of tool mix. And really, it was hard to get anything established with him because he couldn't establish that 4-seamer or really that sinker. -5 run value off the 4-seamer, just a 1 run value off the sinker, which isn't bad. Maybe that's an adjustment he looks at more, maybe getting a little bit more movement on his sinker. But again, really hard to kind of assess. The batting averages on the 4-seamer got pounded a little bit. I think there was a little bit of concern when it came to the walks, 16th percentile in walks. That was definitely a problem. And again, when you're walking people, it's never going to help you, especially when you're trying to get accustomed to the league and you're having to pitch from the stretch, have pitch with runners on base. You got to change how your stride. You got to be quicker to the plate. It's going to be harder to get adjusted. So For me, it's still hard to pinpoint him, but I can say this for certain. As a starter, it was rocky, and you picked him up from Japan. Obviously, he's Cuban, but he played in the NPB. When you picked him up from Japan, he was a reliever, and he had a lot of success being a reliever. I really do think that if the Blue Jays want to help Yariel Rodriguez's development, and we have him for quite a long time, you got to go and you got to pick up another starter to take over that fifth spot of the rotation, right? You got to put Yariel Rodriguez back in the bullpen, have him some comfort, build up during the year, kind of like what you did with BOwden Francis in the beginning of the year a little bit, of moments where there was like kind of bullpen long relief roles. I think you really got to put Yariel Rodriguez in that pen. He's a long project for this team. Bring in somebody who has experience starting every fifth game so that you take the pressure off Yariel and that we can get a chance to win a game and we're not just rolling a wild card out there. So for me, I'd be concerned if he was a starting pitcher. In the pen, I would not be as concerned. Where are you kind of at?
I don't know if I fully agree with you on all that. Like,
hey guys, time for a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video. Hit your picks and knock it out of the park with Betway. Scan the QR code down below or click the link in the description to join the action. Available in Ontario only. Must be 19 years older to participate. And guys, please bet responsibly. Now, back to the content.
I hear your argument and I hear what you're saying, but maybe it's some of the internal conversations that, we don't know. Has Yariel been, pushing to be that starter? Does he feel more comfortable being a starter right now? Maybe, I don't know, because the MPB, right, you got to remember, when he was a reliever, that was two and a little bit whole years removed from that, because he didn't play a whole year prior to coming to the MLB. So we're like 2.5 years removed from him being a reliever, right?
I guess that's another argument you can make right there, where because he hasn't pitched and he had that whole off year, is ramping him up to a starter affecting him, because clearly he couldn't go that far in games at all last year.
No, he couldn't. But I think ultimately that was also last year. It was more about necessity when you had those injuries off the top, and there's like, okay, well now Yariel Rodriguez is going to start for us, and then it's like, okay, well now we've started him being a starter, we're going to continue down this path. And I guess for me, it's like, because you've started that route and started that path, unless I see you like completely fucking fall off the cliff, I think I would continue with it, at least to begin the season. I want to see him like come in here and start some games with us. I would love to see a 6-man rotation for the Toronto Blue Jays, which I want to finish with right now, just because of everyone. I think everyone could use that extra day. You're talking about health with Gausman. You're talking about health with Chris Bassitt. You're talking about inconsistencies with some of the other guys. I think a 6-man rotation would be great for all these guys. But for me, it's like, I would like to see Yariel Rodriguez start in the rotation. I am concerned about it. And then ultimately, like, if it's not working out, that's when you make the adjustment. That's when you put him in the bullpen. Or if it is working out, then, you continue to ride with it.
Yeah, I think for level of concern, if he starts in the rotation, I'm at a good 7 right now, because again, we saw the sample size, we saw the games. It was 86 innings, again, not large, but that's half a season of you starting. And again, it was very, very inconsistent.
Record of 1-8.
A record of 1 and we literally lost. It felt like we lost every single game.
A lot of games,
that Yariel Rodriguez was starting for the boys, especially because 1-8. Well, he couldn't even go 5 innings to record a win. No. Right? That's the thing too. It's like you're having to piggyback someone off of him anyways, at least for last year. Maybe that changes. Maybe he's built up more, but that's another concern, right? Is he going to be built up to even go 5 innings? And how are those 5 innings going to look like? Are they quality? So there's a lot of question marks, and there's not a lot of great signs. So I'm going to increase it to an 8. If he's a starter, I'm at an 8 right now.
I get that. I guess for me, I just have optimism, like, because that was his first year in MLB, and because the year prior he hadn't pitched, there was a lot of pitch limits and innings and everything like that. And I'm hoping that this time around, they kind of unload him a bit more, and obviously he's able to get a couple more outs when you need them to off the top of the game. Because a lot of times too with Yariel Rodriguez, once he made it through that like first 1 or 2 innings, he settled back in, but like he did get jumped on pretty early, sometimes in that first or second inning. So am I talking about what I asked there?
No, I think you're actually right. Yeah, I was looking up too in that first inning. He had Actually, well, he actually was doing pretty decent. It was usually the third time around he started to get beat up quite a bit, actually. But no, I do remember. I think you're pulling that up because there's a lot of memories of him getting blown up in the first little bit.
Looking
right there.
at, yeah, I mean, the
but
second,
the ERA,
third, and fourth inning, the ERA is pretty good.
And
First inning, terrible, and fifth inning, terrible.
And you could see why right there. The walks were insane in the first inning. He was just trying to get comfortable again, right? And like And again, things might change if he goes to the pen, because if you're in the pen, well, let's drop 3 of your 5 pitches and just hammer in the fastball or whatever it might be, the split finger slide. Whatever's working for you this year, let's hammer that in and not try to focus on establishing the long game. It's a different kind of pitching style, so maybe that might work better for him. But you're right, yeah, once he got settled and he made it a little bit further, then those were those good games that he had.
This has been a long one, so let's wrap it up and conclude with where you're at right now with this rotation. Looking at we just did a deep dive on every single person that should start. Alek Manoah, if he is going to start, is going to come in later in the season, so that's why we didn't talk about him. But right now, those are the starters. Do we need somebody else in that rotation? Are you comfortable with it where it is right now to start this season? Is it a strength of ours? Overall final thoughts here.
Yeah, I think we do need one more arm in that rotation, because we're got to protect ourselves from injuries as well. Like, right, if one guy goes down, well, who's starting, right? Alek Manoah's not going to – if an injury happens early in the year, is it going to be Jake Bloss coming up and starting? Like, what? That's a concern of 9 for me, you know? Like, that starts to get really concerning right now. So adding one more arm, again, like I said, not only helps with that Yariel Rodriguez situation, but it also helps your depth as well in case somebody gets hurt. And, again, you have the ability to do a 6-man rotation. I think adding one guy doesn't need to be a Max Scherzer. It could be a Jose Quintana, right? It could be somebody just to fill in some innings. But I think one more arm, and I'm feeling more confident than I am right now.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is for me, like, in seasons prior, I looked at this rotation and I said to myself, that could be top 5.
For
sure. And I don't think I can necessarily say that anymore, just because of some of the stuff that we brought up right here. Like, I do believe in Gausman, and I do believe in Jose Berrios and what have you. But when you look around the American League, like, there are other better rotations than what we have right now, or at least more solidified rotations. And then you factor in the injuries as well. If we had a top 5 lineup in all of baseball, I'd be like, all right, it's fine.
Yeah,
you know what?
we
can be okay with this. We can get by with this. But because that isn't the case, and because, yes, we brought in Santander, but we're still wondering, like, are we going to even be an average offense this year? Because last year, I mean, that just wasn't the case. We can score runs, right? We got to at least be an average offense. So because of all of that, I am also a bit concerned with this rotation, and I would like to see at least one more person come in here, like Quintana, like Scherzer, somebody that can take a little bit of the pressure off, maybe could have a really solid, year in their veteran ages, and then also to, like, just alleviate some of the injury concerns.
Yeah, and then, to do a little prediction right here, if we do bring in another arm, I could probably confidently say, because I think we were like top 8 in ERA, pitcher ERA, or starting pitcher ERA last year, I'll probably say if we bring in one more arm, maybe we're back into that low top 10 again, like top 10, top 11, maybe just outside. I would feel confident in that.
I would hope so. And again, like, it gives you so much more, because you look at this right now and Kevin Gausman gets hurt. Well, we're done. We're kind of like we might be done. We might actually be, or even somebody like a Chris Bassitt too, right? Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, who is coming up? Is it Jake Bloss? Is it, right? Like, who is going to be that guy? I don't know. There's going to be injuries. Having depth is important. We're already using Yariel as a starter in this prediction right now, so having some other guys would help. You guys let us know in the comments down below. What did you think about this? I know a long one, over 30 minutes, but you know what? We figured we'd really deep dive into this and give everybody the time they deserve, Gausman, Bassitt, everything like that. So please let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.
Yeah, if you like that video, hit that like button, subscribe to Blue Jays Today, $3 a month, become a Patreon member. Shout out and thank you to all of our current Patreon members and to our YouTube members. You guys are absolutely awesome.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. And as always,
go Jays, go!